Thank you everybody for coming here on our Aloha Friday in the evening. I know everybody's getting off of work and wants to go kick back a little bit, so we'll get started right away. I'm Russell Galanti. I am the Ornamental Crops Extension Agent for University of Hawaii's College of Tropical Ag and Human Resilience for East Hawaii, Hilo. And I'm uh, joined by Arissa Barcenas, the Outreach Associate for the CRB Response Team, and Kavehi Young, the Public Outreach Coordinator for the Big Island Invasive Species Committee. Uh, Both of these individuals are essentially experts in CRB, and what they're going to do today for us is go over the updates for CRB on Big Island, where we're at, and outline a lot of different things like identification, management, control, et cetera. And then we'll have some time for question and answer. So I think we're gonna let Arissa start us off. So thank you so much, Arissa.
Great, thank you. Again, my name is Arissa. I'm with the Coconut Rhinoceros Beetle Response Program. I'm going to start with just some general info about CRB and some larger updates in Hawaii. And then I'm going to pass it off to Kavehi in the middle to talk about specific timeline on Big Island and the activities happening there. So the coconut rhinoceros beetle is an invasive beetle in Hawaii. It's native to Southeast Asia, and it is very harmful to particularly palms, but also some other host plants that we have here. The adults, so the beetle that you see up in that left hand corner, these guys are primarily feeding on the sap of palm trees and are nocturnal. And then in their earlier life stages, you'll see them usually as grubs or larvae, and these guys are going to be in compost and mulch, really any decaying plant material. So these adults, they're going to be solid black, about 2 inches large. They're very big beetles, and then they're going to have a horn at the front of their head. And so these are some of the distinguishing features of CRB. Again, they are active at night. So oftentimes you get reports of people seeing beetles that are maybe swarming around their trees or flying around in the day. Usually that's not CRB. If you're finding them in the day, they're pretty sedentary, maybe just on the ground. And it's not very typical that we see them at in the daytime. And then before they become adults, another stage that you'll see them in that they spend a lot of time in is these larval or grub stages. And so in this stage, they're going to be, again, pale white, or sometimes they can look brown depending on the material that they're in. And then they're going to have a reddish brown head capsule, and they can get up to 3 inches in size. So they do start off very small, and we'll see that in the next slide, but they do grow very large. One distinguishing factor about CRB is that they're going to curl into a C shape. So there are some other grubs that you'll find in that same material, so compost mulch. But that the way that it curls is something that we use often to tell them apart. And if you have any questions about, I guess, other lookalike species, you can always text photos or email photos to BISC or the CRB response, and we can help with that identification. Okay, so here we have the life cycle of the coconut rhinoceros beetle. And so as adults is kind of the most identifiable stage. So these adult beetles, they're going to lay eggs in, again, any decaying plant waste. These eggs are going to develop through 3 different larval instars. Then they're going to go through metamorphosis, pupate, and become adults. And so as adult beetles, they are feeding on palm trees. But in these earlier life stages, from egg until they become adult, they're going to spend a long time in that breeding material. And so throughout this presentation, we're going to focus a lot on the importance of searching through and managing breeding material. And that's because they spend so much time in that material. And the coconut rhinoceros beetle, its primary hosts in Hawaii are going to be palms like coconut, fan, date, and royal palms. In the event that these palms aren't available in the landscape or um, the beetle populations are really high, we start to see them host shift to some secondary hosts. And sorry, we can next slide, please. Yeah. So these secondary hosts can include things like different palms, so things like triangle palms, foxtail palms. We see some damage on, as well as some other crops. So things like pineapple, challah, sugarcane, kalo, banana can all be hosts to CRB. So the signs of CRB damage can look a little bit different across different hosts. And one thing that's important to think about when looking for damage is the way that the beetle feeds. And so the beetle is feeding on palms by either flying or crawling up to the crown of the palm. And then they're going to use mostly their legs to bore down into the heart of the palm where they feed on the juice and the sap. And so the damage that results from those feeding events on coconuts are going to display as these 45-degree V cuts on the coconut fronds that you see on the left. When they cause that damage, you'll also see these 2-inch boreholes, and these boreholes are more consistent across all hosts. And then on some other palms, like fan palms, the damage obviously to the frond is going to look a little bit different. And so you'll see scalloped edges or what we call a snowflake effect. And so the way that this damage is happening is these leaves are, or these fronds are getting damaged while they're still inside the palm. So before they've emerged out of the palm and grown out. And so that damage is happening while it's still all bundled together. And so that's why you have these uniform cuts throughout. And so because that damage is happening before the fronds emerge, oftentimes when we see damage, it means that a beetle had fed months prior to when we're actually seeing the effects. And so um, when we see damage, it's a good sign that CRB is in the area, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the beetle that caused that damage is still actively in the tree or feeding. And then there's some other look-alike damage. So some things that are commonly mistaken for CRB damage are things like rat damage, which can look really similar. Sometimes they'll like chew at the fronds in similar patterns, or even cause chew at the fronds to cause kind of holes throughout. So sometimes the damage from rats can look pretty similar. Trimming damage is another one that is often mistaken for CRB damage, especially depending on how that damage happened. It can look very similar to those V cuts. And then other things that we get often reported as potentially CRB are things like trunk rot. With CRB being such a big problem, when people start to see their trees dying fast, then they report it and automatically assume it's CRB, but there are some other things. And so again, if you are seeing things that look suspicious for CRB on Big Island, we're encouraging people to report any signs of CRB. So you can snap photos and send it to us, or even some videos that are helpful. So coconut rhinoceros beetle is obviously harmful to a lot of different hosts in Hawaii. And these different hosts serve so many different purposes as well. And so the coconut rhinoceros beetle, one of its favorite food sources is unfortunately our native and endemic lolu palms. And so on Oahu, that's where this photo was taken, is where we're starting to see really heavy damage to these native palms and to our native environment. And then, of course, threat and harm to the economy. A lot of these hosts are used as um, hosts for sustenance or as um, like food crops, and even ornamental industries and landscaping industries are heavily affected by CRB. And then, of course, the importance of these hosts to cultural practices and to the way of life in Hawaii. And so things like weaving and different uses for the coconut tree. Obviously, there's numerous cultural practices associated with coconut and with hala and with these hosts. And so these are all things that are at risk because of CRB. So how did coconut rhinoceros beetle arrive in Hawaii? Um, the coconut rhinoceros beetle, again, is native to Southeast Asia, but has spread throughout many places in the Pacific. And so there are two main waves of movement in the Pacific of coconut rhinoceros beetle. And so um, CRB is now in places like Palau, Guam, Saipan, Samoa, all before it was detected on Hawaii, on Oahu back in December 2013 was when we first found CRB. And so before we start talking about management of coconut rhinoceros beetle, this is a video that we like to show. This specific area is a golf course in central Oahu that um, the area has really high beetle populations. And this particular site, we're following a lot of the best management practices that we had for CRB. But unfortunately, across the street, there were large amounts of accumulated green waste. And so what we saw is even with them following their practices on their site, as long as there's an abundance of material for CRB in the area, they can thrive and they can continue to damage properties and trees that are on areas where they're following best management practices. And the reason we show this isn't to, make people scared or lose hope, but to encourage people and to remind people that this really is going to be a community effort. And so it's going to take everybody's involvement and everyone's um, engagement in combating CRB. Okay, and so this slide shows the invasion curve. And so it shows the different um, stages of management when an invasive species is in a new area. And so on this curve, you have the different stages: prevention, eradication, containment, and then long-term control and management. Um, and as each area the area infested and control cost rises, as well as there's exponential growth and spread of the beetle, we move from prevention to long-term control and management. And so currently each island is in a different stage of management for CRB. And in each stage, the activities are going to vary. And so right now, Lanai and Molokai are in prevention. Maui and Big Island are in this eradication stage. And so a species was introduced, we move into this eradication. In this stage, populations are still really low, and we're not seeing widespread of this species yet. And so a lot of the activities that happen in this eradication stage prioritizes finding and removing any potential breeding material or risks for CRB. And then as populations continue to grow and spread, you move into this containment stage. And so this is where Kauai is. And then from containment, once populations are widespread, you move into this long-term control and management, which is where Oahu is. So moving into the timeline, and a lot of this we discussed already, but we'll give some dates and then I'll pass it off to Kavehi. So in December 2013, this was the first detection of CRB in Hawaii on Oahu. In 2017, following this detection of CRB on Oahu and acknowledging the risks of movement of CRB, Mamalu Poi Poi program initiated putting traps up at all the ports on all the islands. And so CRB traps were placed everywhere at all the ports. And then in June 2023 was the first detection of CRB on Kauai. And then in October 2023 was when CRB was first detected on Big Island. And then November 2023, CRB was detected on Maui. And so since this October 2023, this first detection on Big Island, a lot has happened. And so we're going to continue on with the timeline. I'm going to pass it off to Kavehi so she can dive a little bit deeper into exactly what's happening on Big Island.
Mahalo, Arissa, for that overview. So as she mentioned in the previous slide, October 2023 was the first time that CRB was confirmed on our island. And so a Waikoloa resident was going through a decaying palm stump that she had on her property to use that soft material for compost, and she came across 5 grubs. And so she was alarmed. She did the right thing and she reported the grubs to the Hawaii Department of Agriculture. They sent those off for DNA analysis and they were confirmed as CRB. So since that first detection, we really ramped up our monitoring efforts in the Waikoloa area. As Arissa mentioned, a lot of our monitoring efforts were contained to both the airports and the harbors on both sides of the island. And so we started to deploy detection traps in Waikoloa, and we also partnered up with Dr. Michelle Reynolds of Hawaii Detection Dogs to really ramp up our capacity for detection. In April 2024 was when we had our first detection of adults in the Waikoloa area. And the CRB response, along with HDOA, worked to treat the trees in Waikoloa Village. In September 2024, we had another find of an adult in the village, and we started to see a few cases of palm damage being reported, both in coconut palms and triangle palms. Now, since September 2024, we have not had any new detections of beetles, larvae, or palm damage in the Waikoloa area. So in the beginning of March was the first time that CRB was found outside of Waikoloa, this time in Kona. And so that picture on the left-hand side is that first beetle that was detected. This was in a monitoring trap at the Kona airport on the southern end. And so when we got that detection, we started to put up more of these detection traps in the surrounding areas of the airport. So Host Park, or some people know it as Nelha, the Keauhole Ag Park, which is across the street from the airport at the bottom of Ka'iminani Drive. And so we had trap finds in those areas as well as Kohanaiki. In April, the CRB response team, so Arissa came over and we hit a bunch of different resorts trying to really train the staff who are working on these landscapes, who are up in the trees, who are dealing with a lot of this green waste to make sure that they understand and know what to look for. We taught them best management practices as well as the importance of reporting. The Hawaii Department of Agriculture is really the lead when it comes to the treatment of palms. And so since that first detection back in March, their team has been working to treat the palms in the areas in which CRB has been detected. In May, we had 3 more detections of adult beetles, and so we continue to search for breeding sites. And as Arissa mentioned, this is really what we're trying to find. We're trying to find where those larvae are so that we can prevent their populations from growing and also prevent a lot of damage to trees. Thanks to a grant from the County of Hawaii, we're able to ramp up our detector dog surveys. And so moving forward, we're really trying to focus in the Kona area. So if you folks live in the Kona Palisades area, or you know someone who does, feel free to reach out to us. We love to bring our dog over to search your property. We're also doing a bunch of different trainings in the community. We also do outreach in the schools. So if you're a teacher, you know any teachers, please have them reach out to us, and we'd love to go into the classroom. And another thing I wanted to mention is that we are in the process of planning a Pacific-wide CRB Science Symposium. So this is going to be virtual. It's going to happen in October of 2025. So we will be putting more information out on that in the next few months. And of course, BISC isn't the only organization that's working on this response. CRB team, the Department of Agriculture, the county, UH Hilo, CTAR. It really takes an interagency collaboration to really have a robust response. And because we're so early on, if you remember that invasion curve that Arissa shared, we are really early on and we really want to make sure that we go hard at this point. Because if we can detect where these breeding sites are, eliminate them, we think that we have a chance at eradication. And so I know these maps look a little crazy, but the one on the left is Waikoloa and the one on the right is Kona. And so the dots that you see, these yellow and blue dots represent the detection traps. And then these X's are where we've had finds so far. So in Waikoloa, we found a total of 5 adult beetles and 6 larvae. So those 6 larvae is that first initial detection that I spoke about in that timeline. And then here on the right-hand side is our map of Kona. And so far, since March of this year, we found 13 adults and 1 larva. And so in addition to setting up those traps, we're also looking at palm. So these palm surveys, basically it's us driving at 5 miles an hour with a binocular, looking at coconut trees to see if we can spot that damage. And we've been doing this since 2017. And really just trying to keep an eye out for the damage. Now, when I drive, I'm always looking for palm damage, and I'm sure a lot of you folks, now that you have kind of CRBs on your mind, you're always on the lookout for palm damage, and that's really important. But I really want to point your attention to this graphic because, Arissa mentioned this earlier, most of their life is going to be spent in breeding material. So about 13% of a CRB's life is actually spent on feeding on those host palms. So if we look down here at this text, basically a CRB will spend 42 days in a host plant and about 285 days of their whole life in that breeding material. So when they emerge as adults, they need to get nutrition from that palm to be able to breed. So they'll feed on a palm for a few days and then go back into the breeding sites to lay their eggs, to rest. And then they go back into the palm and then back into the breeding site. So it's really important. Not only are we looking for the palm damage, but really focusing on this breeding material. And so breeding site surveys are really important. They're pretty labor intensive. As you can see, it takes digging into this material and physically searching for the larvae. This picture on the bottom left-hand corner, that's the stump where the first initial larvae were found on our island. So if you have anything like this on your property, any sort of palm stumps that have that soft material in it, that's perfect for the beetle to breed. So it's really important to take these stumps down to the ground if possible. And another way we do these breeding site surveys are with Manu and his handler, Michelle. And so, that could be us looking at the West Hawaii Organics mulch facility or even in backyard. So we've done a lot of these backyard surveys in Waikoloa, and we are going to continue to do them in the Kona area, thanks to that funding from the county. Again, if you're interested in and you live in the Kona Palisades area and you'd like us to come do a survey with the dog, please reach out to us. It takes about 20 minutes. And Manu will do a survey of your front and backyard. And his sense of smell is so much stronger than us humans. And so it really cuts down on that time and that labor when we can use the dog. And he can tell us, hey, I think there's something in this area. Let's focus on digging in this area. A lot of the work that I do at BISC is in this public outreach. So whether that's, going to different community meetings or different events, going into the schools, We're also on social media, so if you're on Facebook or Instagram, please follow us. We try our best to put out updates as often as we can. And so, as far as the things that you folks can do, one of the biggest thing is to inspect materials, any sort of breeding materials that you're bringing onto your property. If you're bringing on mulch, bagged soil, if you have any decaying palm stumps, it's really important to be vigilant and to be looking for these grubs. If we remember that life cycle that Arissa showed, it takes many months for them to get to that third instar stage. And so if you're stockpiling a bunch of mulch, say for, many months at a time, we say don't stockpile more than 4 months because if you're going to inspect that material, you're going to come across these larger larvae that are easier to see. On Oahu, so these pictures of the larvae are coming from Oahu. We see this a lot on social media where people are they're buying soil from these garden stores, taking it home, and then opening it up and finding a bunch of larvae in them. And so on Oahu, populations are so widespread to the point where the beetles are flying into these areas where these garden stores are stocking all of their products outside. And so the beetles can get into a palm tree. It's pretty easy for them to rip a hole into these bags and lay their eggs. Um, and so it's just really important to be vigilant, especially if you're doing any sort of gardening, to be inspecting all of this material. If you buy bagged soil like this, inspect it. You can put it in a sealed container, and that way you know that the beetles aren't going to be colonizing that material. This video does a great job at showing just how large these larvae are. Um, Again, only 13% of a CRB's lifespan is actually spent feeding on the host plants. So really focusing on looking for the larvae is so, so important. So we have an online reporter form. We have this number that you can text. You can email us or send us pictures and videos on social media. Any way that's easiest for you. We just really encourage folks to report anything suspect that you come across. It's just really, really important. And there are some look-alike species, so I wanted to go over some of these. The first one being the dung beetle. We hear a lot where people think that the CRB starts off really small and then it grows really large. That's not how the beetle works. When they emerge as adults, they're going to be that, 2 inches large and they're not going to change in size. The dung beetle has that horn, so, I can see why some people will mistake it for the CRB, but they're much tinier. The Oriental flower beetle is commonly mistaken. Probably our top report that we get is Oriental flower beetle. This is the black beetle that you'll often come into contact with when it's flying around during the day. It doesn't have a horn, but it is shiny and black, and so it's commonly mistaken for CRB. Their larvae look very similar to CRB, and so in the next slide, I believe, yes, I have a graphic that kind of shows some of the differences and things to keep an eye out for. So the Oriental flower beetle, it crawls flat on its back with its legs in the air. So that's one of the easiest ways to tell. It also has this raster line here. And so we refer to it as a butt crack sometimes. It's easier for people to remember, right? Like these are things that you're looking for if you're coming across larvae in your garden, to look at how is it crawling? Does it have that raster line? And the OFB also tucks its head into its midsection. Now the CRB is so fat that it's not able to do that. It curls into that C shape. Again, if you're unsure what you're looking at, you come across grubs and you're not sure if it's CRB or OFB, feel free to take videos, take pictures. It really helps us identify what species we're looking at. So you can see here with the OFB, see its legs are in the air and you see that raster line. The head capsule is also much smaller than the CRB. Again, if you're coming across grubs, take clear photos, videos if you can, and save the grubs if possible. We've had a few reports where someone says, "Hey, I seen a big grub. It was CRB. I'm 100% certain." And they don't have any photos. They smash the grubs, and so that makes it really hard for us to kind of follow up on that report. So it's really important that you save the sample. And if it is in fact CRB, we can use that to train Manu, the detector dog. And of course, if you are coming across any sort of suspect palm damage, it's really important to take photos from different angles. Again, like what Arissa said, the when you have a CRB feeding on a tree, that damage is going to show up in the center of the palm. So it can take months for those fronds to grow out so that you can actually see them from the ground and they're visible to the human eye. Um, so taking pictures, really keeping an eye out for these scalloped edges, and of course the 2-inch bore holes. Now, here are some methods that are known to kill CRB in all life stages. So, of course, chipping, if you can chip material, this will kill the CRB, as well as hot composting. So, the CRB dies at around 115 degrees. The recommendation is to heat that material up to 131. And so if the core is at 131, those edges will be at about 115 and will kill the beetle. Submerging and steam treatments are also known to kill CRB. So I did want to mention netting. Netting is an important management tool. It's not going to be 100%, but this is something that is being used both on Oahu and in Guam. It's a illegal fish net to use in the water. It's a 1/2 inch to 1 inch eye. And what you can do is if you know that you're going to be stockpiling material for a long time, you can cover that pile with this netting. And if there are any beetles in the material that are trying to get out, it'll prevent them from flying away. And alternatively, if you have beetles in the area that are trying to get in, they'll get caught in this netting. Um, it's good to use multiple layers and not stretch it too tight so that they can get stuck in that netting. This method is also used on shorter, more dwarf palms. And so that's another way that it can be used. So, we live on a very large island and we are a small team, so we're not able to set up and monitor traps all over the island. And so we do have a community trapping network. Now, 14 out of the 18 beetles that were detected on our island were found in this kind of detection trap. Now, it's important to note that these traps are not for control. They're not going to get rid of all of the beetles, but they're going to let us know if it's in an area and if we really need to concentrate our resources and our efforts in a certain area. And so these traps are baited with a pheromone lure that sit in the middle here. Again, the beetles are active at night, so they're going to be drawn to that pheromone. They're going to hit that panel and they're going to drop into the cup. And so if you are interested in hosting a detection trap, you can reach out to us, and we can work on getting that out to you. And so if you are hosting a trap and participating in our community monitoring program, we give you everything you need. We give you the pheromones. All we ask is that you check the trap on a regular basis and you report that to us. Even if you aren't catching beetles in your trap, it's really important for us to know that information as well. And again, if you're interested in a dog survey, please reach out to us, and we can get you on our waiting list. And if you are a landscaper or if you want to refer us to your tree trimmers, we'd love to do a training for your staff. So again, please reach out to us. We really go into the nitty-gritty of control and management and treatment. in these trainings. And of course, spreading the word. It's so important for us to be sharing this information with everyone. Remember that video that Arissa shared? This is a community. It's going to take everyone to play a part in this response. And so we have a bunch of these rack cards and brochures. If you'd like to share this information with your neighbors and friends, we can get that information to you. If you'd like to set up a community presentation in your neighborhood, we'd love to come out to you. And of course, following us on social media and signing up for our e-newsletter. That can be found on our website, bisc.org, BIISC.org. And that was it for our presentation. We wanted to leave some time for questions. Mahalo.
Great presentation. We do have some questions. So the first question was, what palm treatments does HDOA use for treating the palms? What's their process there?
So, from what I understand, HDOA is doing both injections and crown treatments. So the injections are going to be a systemic treatment that last for about a year, and the crown treatments are done with a bucket truck, and those last about 3 to 4 months. I'm sure Arissa can add on to that.
Yeah, I'll just add just a little bit. So the injections and the crown treatments are a little bit different. So the injections are systemic treatments. So they're gonna go throughout all parts of the palm. So it does take a little while for it to, um, I guess, take effect, reach that crown area. And then once the beetle feeds, that's when they die. Whereas the crown sprays are more contact treatments. So it's going to kill any beetles that are in the tree at time of treatment, and then for about 3 months after is the estimated time frame.
And I believe the most common treatment is going to be imidacloprid, right? So it's Imajet through using the
Mhm.
ARBjet system.
Yes, that's for the injections.
And then I think a relevant question would be if the palms are being injected, can anybody eat the coconuts?
So for the injected palms, with imidacloprid specifically, because it goes throughout all of the tree tissue, all the coconuts, so the flowers and fruit should be trimmed before treatment. So
Right.
no. Yeah.
Okay. Couple questions on mulch. Will high rainfall kill larvae in mulch? And does spreading the mulch thin in a thin layer help with killing larvae? So yeah, mulch control.
Yeah. Okay, so for high rainfall to kill CRB, you would have to get that material kind of drowning in water for at least 48 hours. So if it's just getting kind of soggy throughout, it's actually really ideal for CRB. They do like moist material. So as long as the larvae aren't going to drown in the material, if it's moist, they really, really like that. Um, and then in terms of spreading it out, that's something that we recommend as a management tool, because if you're able to spread it out, especially if you're on the Kona side and it's a lot hotter and drier, once you spread out that material, make it really dry. CRB tend to not like that really dry material. So spreading it thin will both dry it out. And if there's any larvae inside, if you have things like chickens or mongoose around, sometimes they'll eat um, the smaller larvae.
And we had a kind of a comment from regarding the coconuts. The understanding is that any coconuts that are being treated are also being trimmed for the fruits and flowers. So there's not really the concern there of folks eating any of the coconut parts. But yeah, it should be made public knowledge that you can't eat the coconuts. Uh,
Yes, yeah. And I believe HDOA is labeling all the trees. So those trees in the area have tags that they were treated, as well as I believe like caution tape almost.
And then we had a question to review the secondary hosts. Maybe if you even possible, you could go back to the slide of non coconut hosts for one of the attendees. Oh, and we got a great question after we review the secondary coconut hosts.
And so these aren't all the secondary hosts. If you go to our website, you can find a longer list of the hosts. But it was really interesting for us to be seeing damage to triangle palms in Waikoloa Village. From what I understand, that's not really common on Oahu. I don't know if that's just because we have more triangle palms here on our island, but it's been really interesting for us to see that.
I missed a question from earlier. If you have an idea, what is the percentage of CRB that's attracted to the traps? Are they going to attract from very far away? Yeah, I think maybe there's some concern of like, are we just bringing all the CRB to us by using traps? And so that's, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we think that the traps are probably catching um, close to 5%, 5 to 10% on the upper end of beetles in the area. And the range is obviously going to depend a lot on environmental factors like wind or um, that type of thing. But with traps that we've set up on Oahu, we've looked at some of the data in our traps and um, what we saw was that the trap range is very limited. So it could draw beetles from your neighbor to your house, but it's not going to draw it, from miles away. One particular site that we looked at, we had traps up for since the beginning of our program, so since about 2014. And we had those set up and none of those traps ever caught. But then just about less than half a mile away, there we found evidence that CRB has um, had established on this farm and had caused extensive damage, but had never moved out to the trap. So probably less than about half a mile, and then about 5 to 10% of beetles in the area.
Yeah, in terms of attractiveness, I think if a beetle had to choose, they'd go for that mulch over a trap.
Oh, interesting. Um,
Mhm.
I like this question. How safe is it to use the county mulch from either the West Hawaii Organics facility or the Kealakahe transfer station?
So the county is really concerned, and they really want to make sure that they're following the best management practices. So they have worked with the CRB team to employ those BMPs. So they chip material and they prioritize palm material to get chipped as soon as possible. They make sure that their mulch is reaching that 131, and they turn their piles 5 times, and they measure it to make sure it hits that 131 before being distributed. And so as long as that material is hot, the beetles aren't going to like to be in that material. It's really important to understand that when you bring that material onto your property and it starts to cool down, it becomes perfect for the CRB. So really making sure that you're either containing that material, using it as soon as possible, spreading it as thin as you can, is going to be really important. So the mulch that's at the Kealakahe transfer station is coming from the West Hawaii Organics facility. In terms of the amount of mulch that they're producing, it's important that they are offloading that hot material and not letting it sit on their property, because then that means that the material is going to cool down and it becomes a potential breeding site. So it's really important to make sure that everything's getting really hot and being offloaded.
Great. Oh, so they're not heating any mulch at the Kealakekee transfer station. It's all going to be not managed temperature wise there.
It all gets yeah, it all gets produced, it gets taken, produced at the West Hawaii Organics facility and then taken back
Right.
to
Essentially stored
California.
there for distribution. Gotcha.
Mhm.
Um, is there any information on the retention time of the injected systemic insecticides on host plant tissue? So how long do you think the current used systemics are in the palms?
Yeah, so based on the label, the retreatment interval is about a year, less than a year. So about a year.
Okay.
And then yeah, I see these other questions about yeah, concern about the fruit having the pesticide as well. And so yeah, according to the label, so anyone treating with these systemics, specifically the imidacloprid, um, it's illegal to treat off the label, and the label is only dedicated for ornamental palms. So in order to treat, you would have to make it an ornamental palm. So making sure that you remove the fruit and then continue to trim the fruits and flowers. And then the flowers is mostly concerned for pollinators as well.
Great. Are there any other questions? Speak now.
I see a question here from Bill about surveying for the beetles. So when we do those palm surveys, yes, we're looking for damaged palms. Sorry, let me just read through this comment. Uh, Yes. And so this is why surveys are not only the thing that we're doing. Again, they're really just going to tell us if the beetles are in the area. Um, looking for these breeding sites are by far more important. Identifying green waste piles, doing surveys with the dog are going to be really, really important. And of course, setting up those monitoring traps to really help us figure out where we need to pour in those resources. Because looking through that breeding material is very labor intensive, and we live on a very large island. So it helps us kind of hone in on where we need to focus. We have a question about the dog detection. So far on our island, we're still so early on that we haven't found many larvae. Just that initial detection back in October, and then we had a single larva detection last week, and that was landscaping staff who came across that. But I think maybe Arissa can speak to the dog work that's happening on Oahu.
Yeah, for sure. So it's kind of hard to say what the dogs might have missed, especially in the field when they're searching, right? If they didn't detect CRB without searching through every pile that they're also surveying, it's hard to say, I guess, their success rate, but they are, I guess, anecdotally, they've been really helpful and successful in finding breeding sites that um, it's a large amount of material that's just not practical
Oh, hi. Hey,
for
I'm just working on your palm trees. So I'm just taking the count. It's done. Sorry about it.
um
Thank you. Thanks for asking.
sorry yeah, just might not be practical to search large amounts of material. So the dogs are really helpful for searching that large amount of material and effectively searching it. um and then also for places where um we we maybe wouldn't rate as good material for CRB. The dogs have found breeding happening in things like underground stumps that were kind of hidden from grass that had grown over it. So detecting CRB in areas where we're maybe not looking, they've been really helpful for as well.
And then there's a question here from Dana about the dog potentially getting sick. So the dog Manu has been working for about 2 years doing these surveys, and we haven't experienced any sort of health issues with that. Um, I don't know if you had anything else to add there. So,
Yeah.
Okay.
So for all the dog surveys too, the dog handlers are pretty careful about making sure that the area is safe for the dog. So they even have teams, like some field crew that go out before the dog starts searching to make sure that there's, no hazards and stuff. Yeah.
this question from Jennifer about where the grub was detected, it was in mulch. Yeah.
And then I'll take the next question. So, in terms of acres, I actually don't have that information on me right now. But yeah, they can survey a pretty large amount of material. They are also limited in the times of day that they can work. We want them working when it's not too hot, of course. Um, so they usually only work for a few hours out in the sun a day. And then, yeah, the exposure again, um, material that is risky, the handlers are avoiding.
And then this last question, it looks like, where was the grub detection located? So this grub was located at the Kona Village Resort. This was a single larvae, so we don't believe the beetle to be established in the area. The mulch had just been brought on a week or two prior. So we're in the process of tracing back that material, doing follow-up surveys at the location where they had sourced the mulch. Um, so that's kind of where we're at right now. And I think those are all the questions.
I think so. Well, you guys answered a lot, a lot of questions. So, and you answered some hard ones too. So everybody, please say thank you, to Arissa and Kavehi for spending, their evenings on Friday, for educating us and updating us. And, if you have any questions, there are the contacts that they shared. And if you need any contacts, you can always contact me through the emails that have been sent regarding this. And I wish everybody a happy long weekend if you have it, and if not, a regular weekend. All righty. Aloha.
Well,